The Indian and Pakistani leaders may have exchanged a handshake, but their forces are still trading bullets. The brief encounter at a regional summit in Nepal seems to have brought the two sides no closer to talks on the major irritant between them, Kashmir. My guest today is India's acting High Commissioner in London. What will it take for face-to-face negotiations to begin? Hardeep Puri, a very warm welcome to the programme. Since the 13th of December attack on the Indian Parliament, Pakistan has arrested, according to some reports, several hundred militants, well over 200. You are still saying no talks with Pakistan. How many arrests will be enough to start the talks?
I don't think the answer to that question would come in terms of numbers arrested. Let's look at it in perspective. The attack on the Indian Parliament took place on December the 13th. They started moving and arresting people 2 weeks later. What we are saying...
They had to find them first, didn't they?
Well, they have to...
Let's be fair.
Well, I think they knew where Maulana Azhar was all along. They knew where the head of Lashkar-e-Toiba were, and they had no difficulty finding them. But...
Well, now they found them and arrested them.
Well, they found them and arrested them, and as the Indian...
So credit where credit is due,
well, to that extent, the External Affairs Minister said that this is a small step forward. But let us
so what would be a big step forward? What would be enough of a step to start talks?
Pakistan should, in the first instance, take a conscious decision that it would not use terror as an instrument of state policy. It should implement that decision when it takes it.
Well, it seems to have taken the decision and started implementing it.
Well, that is an interpretation you're putting on it, and I'd be willing to endorse it if the steps indeed are credible. Let's look at the freezing of accounts.
Are you saying that the steps are not credible?
Not so far, and my Prime Minister has said that when terror is rejected, he'd be willing to resume meaningful discussions with the Pakistanis.
But what are signs that terror has been rejected? What signs are you looking for if arrests is not enough for you?
Well, first of all, arrests are one aspect. The other is to dismantle the entire infrastructure which makes it possible for terrorist outfits to move large amounts of funds around. In one particular account which they froze, they found the princely sum of 700 Pakistani rupees, which is about 10 British pounds. Now, are you trying to tell me that if you give terrorist outfits 2 weeks' notice, they are not going to move their funds around? They will. So all I'm saying is there are 3 or 4 things which they have to do. But all of them...
Which includes going after the funds and arresting people.
First of all, arresting the people, making
which they seem to be doing. The reports this weekend are all of raids on mosques, homes and offices across the country.
If these reports are confirmed, I've seen those reports myself, and if the action against the people who perpetrate terror and those who make it possible to fund this terror are correct, then indeed that would be a step forward.
So this is going to take some time then, before you're going to be satisfied?
Well, we are not saying that we want the action day before yesterday. What we are saying is that we are not impatient, but we are also not willing to wait for years and years. You must realize...
You're not impatient. You're massing tens of thousands of troops along the border, hundreds of thousands.
We have done some deployment, Tim.
That's not a sign of impatience. No, I don't know what is.
That's a sign of pure defensive maneuvers to ensure that...
Defensive? You're not seriously suggesting Pakistan would attack across your border?
We are not suggesting...
With the overwhelming conventional superiority that you have?
Well, we have conventional superiority, and that is for the entire world to see. What we are saying is infiltration of terrorists across the border and other measures. Let me give you a bit of history of the last few months. When the operations against Al-Qaeda began in Afghanistan, Mullah Omar, the chap who escaped on a motorbike yesterday or today, in fact issued a decree saying that all those who are fighting in Kashmir should return to fight the Americans in Afghanistan. You must realize there is interchangeability between the terrorist operatives who fight for Al-Qaeda, Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba.
But so, this is why those organizations have been declared international terrorist organizations by UK and Britain.
Well, we welcome
UK and the US. You must be satisfied with that.
We are extremely grateful to the United Kingdom for having taken that step. Mr. Jack Straw took it in February last year. The United States followed several months later, and we are very happy to find that even now everyone in the world says that in a civilized society there is no place for outfits like the Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba.
But you continue to ratchet up the tension and to talk about war. Your Prime Minister on January the 3rd said war is not unavoidable. Every effort will be made to avoid a war. Every effort short of direct talks.
Every
Not much of an effort, is it?
You talk about ratcheting up the pressure, Tim. I say this is a purely Gandhian approach. In fact, people are saying...
What's Gandhian about war is not unavoidable? It's mentioning the fact that war is a distinct possibility.
This is a situation which is not of our making. This is a situation not of our liking. What we are trying to do is
But you are a huge party to it. You cannot abrogate responsibility.
We are assuming our responsibility, and we are doing all that it can, using diplomatic means to drive home a message that the time has come now to dismantle terrorist outfits. Now, it's not a question of just going after Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. First, you must go after them meaningfully. You have to tell the ISI, the intelligence wing of Pakistan, which produced the Taliban, the Afghan bureau of it produced the Taliban, tell them, look, please stop meddling in the affairs of other countries. Once that decision is taken, I believe things will fall into place.
You know very well that senior officials, particularly in the army, senior extremists have been purged by General Musharraf in recent times. So there again, Pakistan seems to be making the steps, and you're sitting back and saying, this is not enough, this is not enough. You cannot give me concrete answers about when it will be enough.
Let me give you one...
Leading to the suggestion that you're simply milking this crisis to gain international attention.
Not at all, not at all. I don't think we are looking for international attention in the issue of amassing troops along the border. We want international attention as an economy which is growing at 6%, an economy which is a country which is a contributor to regional and global peace.
You appear to fear that you've been left out in the cold. Your Minister for Parliamentary Affairs and Information Technology, Mr. Pramod Mahajan, said he felt Blair and other Western allies were giving Pakistan an easy ride. There cannot be one set of rules for one and another set of rules for another.
I don't see what he said, what Mr. Mahajan said and what you're quoting is objectionable. All we are saying is the international community has to lean on General Musharraf.
Which it is doing, well, which you know it is doing.
We are very happy about that, but let me put it another. We gave them a list of 20 criminals and terrorists. Against 14 of them, there are Interpol Red Corner notices. They are justified and demonstrated criminals and terrorists by international standards, not by our advocacy. All that we are saying is...
It only takes a judge in a particular country to authorize an Interpol Red Notice, as you know. It doesn't take credible evidence to appear in a court for an Interpol notice to be issued.
If you're casting aspersions on the Interpol's process
I'm just saying it's not conclusive proof.
Well, that's your point of view, in which case, let's bring these people to trial. One of them, Dawood Ibrahim, has been in Karachi for years.
To trial where?
Well, he's an Indian national. He should be tried in an Indian court. But what we find is that Pakistan is not even admitting to his presence in Karachi. It would be a great step forward if they said, here is Dawood Ibrahim. The Pakistani press is saying he's living in great opulence and grandeur in Karachi. We are saying, at least arrest him.
Pakistan says it will take actions if India provides credible evidence.
I think Pakistan knows that it has been provided the credible evidence. What Pakistan inevitably does is when an incident like the hijacking of the plane or the attack on the Indian parliament takes place, they take the absurd position that the Indians have themselves engineered this on themselves. We as a democracy are not in the business of killing our own citizens. And I think it's about time that Pakistan chose to denounce and renounce the use of terror as an instrument of state policy. The world would be a much happier place, not only for us in India, but I believe the rest of the world.
The world would be a much happier place if everything that could be done were done to reduce tensions in South Asia, including the prospect, the firm prospect of talks, or a date at least being set for talks, which is what all sides are urging you and Pakistan to do.
You have a point of view, and let me respond to that. Insofar as talks are concerned, my Prime Minister has, in fact, not only walked the extra mile, but several miles.
He's not walking any miles at all at the moment. He's ruling out talks.
He went to Karachi, and he went to Lahore, and what happened? He was rewarded, as he said yesterday, with Kargil and the hijacking of an Indian plane. Then he invited, in spite of all that, he invited President Musharraf to come to India. And what did we get? We got the attacks on 1st October and 13th December on our parliament.
It's no good looking back, is it?
Let's look forward. Let's look forward.
So this is what I'm urging you to do.
Well, Tim, I'm entirely with you. Let us look forward. And what Prime Minister Vajpayee told Prime Minister Blair, in Prime Minister Blair's words, is that if the use of terror is rejected, a solid basis for negotiations will come.
So you would accept, though, that the arrests that have been made so far is something of a solid basis, isn't it?
the words are yours. I said they're a step forward, and if they are followed up by other concrete steps, I think a basis for discussions would come.
How useful was Prime Minister Blair's trip? I mean, bearing in mind that your minister, we just spoke about, Mr. Mahajan, slapped the Prime Minister down saying, people say you've come to cool us down, we've been cool enough for the past 50 years. A bit rude, wasn't it?
I am accredited to the Court of St. James. I'm not going to endorse the kind of adjective you've chosen. I think what the minister said was, you are our guest, we welcome you to India, but people have said...
Stay out of our affairs. That's essentially what he's saying, isn't it?
He did not say that. He said, people say you have come to cool us down, we've been calm for 50 years. Please don't just focus your attention on what Mr. Mahajan said. Please look at the Delhi Declaration which was signed today, which reaffirms the strong partnership that there is between India and the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Blair is a highly respected political figure in India.
And how much use was he in the context of this crisis?
Well, the visit was arranged well before the December 13 attack. Even insofar as December 13 and October 1 and September 11 are concerned, I'm sure that the one-on-one that he had with Prime Minister Vajpayee were very useful, and I'm sure that when Prime Minister Blair leaves for Pakistan later, he will be carrying an understanding of how strong the Indians feel, and I'm sure he will utilize that to get General Musharraf to dismantle the terrorist network which the Pakistanis have allowed to grow in Pakistan.
So useful only in the sense that he can carry a message from your government to Pakistan?
Not at all.
Not useful in the sense that he has carried with him the concerns of much of the Western world that two nuclear-armed states are facing a crucial confrontation.
You know, you say so many interesting things in one go. Let's take this nuclear business up. I don't think there is any real anxiety on the nuclear question. India has a declared no first use of nuclear weapons. We've invited Pakistan not only to join us in the noble venture of curbing terrorism, but also to come up with a nuclear no first use. Insofar as the visit is concerned, I think it's been an excellent visit, and I think you will agree with that. India and UK, the world's largest democracy, the world's oldest democracy, have much to contribute not only for the bilateral relationship, but I believe for regional, global, and for everybody's well-being.
Washington says it's considering sending an envoy to help defuse the crisis. How useful would that be?
Well, the Indian External Affairs Minister has responded by saying that he does not think a special envoy is merited or is necessary.
You won't take any outside mediation whatsoever. This is your firm position. You're sticking to this before September the 11th. You stick to it afterwards.
If Pakistan renounces terrorism, India and Pakistan can resolve all bilateral disputes happily, amicably, by themselves.
You've done pretty badly over the last 30, 40 years, haven't you?
Well, let's look at it this way. If Pakistan...
How many more wars do you want to fight over Kashmir while keeping the world at arm's length?
First of all, I think we've lived quite happily with each other. If you only choose to look at interaction between India and Pakistan...
Happily? How many thousands of people have died?
Well, in the wars, not as many as through terrorism. The root cause of all this is terrorism, which Pakistan thinks will change the situation on the ground. It will not. We have lost 60,000 people in 20 years to terrorism. We haven't lost a fraction of that in the Indo-Pak wars.
You would accept that this is a major flashpoint, Kashmir? A major world flashpoint. It is the only flashpoint in the world where a major party refuses all outside assistance.
I'm not going to abuse your hospitality by comparing this to what is happening in other parts of the world. What I will say is that there is some...
Why would that abuse my hospitality? You're very welcome to give me any answer you choose.
No, I think that to regard the situation there as a global flashpoint is indulging in exaggeration which I won't endorse. I think there is tension. That tension can be brought down very quickly if Pakistan chooses to revert to the kind of conduct that is expected between civilized societies. Once terrorism is removed, we can get back into the bonhomie of Lahore, of Agra, or whatever else General Musharraf wants.
Why are you so afraid of outside mediation? You're afraid that it might criticize the way in which Indian-administered Kashmir has been handled?
Not at all. Because we've tried outside mediation in the 60s. A lot of people have expended energy. Did that help or did it make it worse? I think Pakistan...
You're afraid that elections might have to be held, which you would lose.
Well, let me talk about elections. Elections will be held very shortly, and the people of the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir will exercise their franchise openly in a free manner, which the people of...
That would be a change, wouldn't it?
Well, they've been doing it all along. The people of Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and in fact, in Pakistan are not being allowed to exercise their franchise. But let me go back into this whole business of democracy. I think Pakistan chooses to ignore the fundamental things at issue. Remove terrorism and people will have a chance to come out and vote.
Well, we've already talked about some of the steps that they're taking.
Yeah.
But isn't it a fact that the world has actually changed since September the 11th to the point where a localized conflict is no longer simply the concern of those parties which are immediately involved in it, because, as we've seen, it can get out of hand and travel the rest of the world without borders. That's globalization, isn't it?
Well, globalization has many forms. India has a democratically elected leadership. India is the world's largest democracy. The leadership in India is not only capable, but will handle this in a manner which does not result in an exacerbation in the situation. And if the international community spends a fraction of its energy telling Pakistan to rein in the terrorists and to move back to a form of civilized behavior, believe me...
But you know for a fact they are exercising huge pressure on Pakistan.
They need to do a little more in terms of what they have to tell.
And look at the results in Pakistan. Musharraf has abandoned the Taliban. He's purged the extremists from the armed forces. He's offered the US his air space and air bases. He's changed enormously, hasn't he, since September the 11th?
He has. He has been of some use in the fight against the Al-Qaeda. There also, as a professional, I would believe that that utility is being exaggerated. What we now need to do is to get General Musharraf to move similarly against the terrorism in Kashmir. Now, let me give you one example. When his Afghan policy went up in smoke, he turned around and said, well, I will now ratchet up the pressure in Kashmir. This is a situation of the general's making. We are willing to hold back, exercise restraint, and, in fact, calibrate our moves diplomatically so that he sees the wisdom in Kashmir as well.
You would accept also, by building up your forces to the extent that you have along the border, you multiply the chance of something going wrong. You turn it into a hair trigger along the border. You would have to accept that the more forces you have concentrated in a particular area, the greater the chance that something is done by mistake.
This is neither eyeball to eyeball, nor is it hair trigger. What we have done is to send a message to Pakistan that so far we are using diplomatic means, and if you choose to undertake an adventure, you will receive a reply. This is defensive. Defensive in the sense that we want peace. But as the Prime Minister has said, whilst we prepare and work for peace, we will not leave any chances to be caught unprepared. That's all that's happening.
But you don't accept that you greatly enhance the possibility of a confrontation, of something going wrong, of someone pressing the wrong button at the wrong time, someone getting the wrong signal.
I will give you a short answer. I do not accept it.
You're infallible, then?
It's not.
Your forces are infallible. They never make mistakes.
Well, all of us are human. Therefore, all of us are capable of making mistakes. At the end of the day,
that's the history of the Cold War, isn't it?
At the end of the day, if you could get through deterrence peace in Europe and elsewhere, you will get it there as well. All that remains to be done is for the general to take a nice, decisive, additional step against terrorism, and we'll have peace in South Asia.
Oh, it sounds so easy when you put it like that.
Well, I try to make it less difficult than it already is.
Are you aware, Acting High Commissioner, of the US State Department report published last year, which carried hugely disturbing claims about the abuses and violations carried out by Indian security forces in Kashmir? I'm aware of the report. When we're talking about civilized behavior, yes, and we're talking about respect for democracy, and when we read that the government forces, Indian government forces, continue to commit numerous serious violations of humanitarian law in the disputed state of Jammu and Kashmir. Those are the words of the US State Department report. You would accept that perhaps the moral high ground isn't necessarily yours in this case?
Well, let's look at this report and several other reports. There's another US State Department report on terrorism, and that earlier it used to talk in the early 90s about there being credible evidence of Pakistan supporting terrorism.
Now, can we just answer the charges that are laid at your door, the Indian door?
Our security...
This was published in February last year.
Our security forces, Tim, are facing insurgency. And because they are the security forces of a country which believes that pursuance and observance of human rights is the highest priority, they have been asked to fight with one hand tied behind their backs.
This is why they continue to abduct and kill suspected militants.
Some incidents may take place, but where there are allegations, those are investigated, not only by the Indian National Human Rights Commission, and this ceases to be the kind of talking point it used to be. If there are human rights abuses, it is the government of India and the mechanisms...
Why does it cease to be a talking point? It's published in the latest U.S. Department of State country report on human rights practices in India.
Whatever is published...
It's very much still a talking point.
Well, it is a talking point, but we investigate it, and where there are people...
Some have been investigated.
Some have been investigated, and people have in fact been punished, which is more... Well, you will carry out a military campaign in another area north of where you are talking about, and 65 people get killed in a convoy coming for Hamid Karzai's inauguration. Would you say that's a human rights violation? That's a mistake which has occurred. In this case, so I don't want to draw parallels, but what I am telling you...
Mistakes of extrajudicial killings by government security
I don't
forces?
think there is a single extrajudicial killing or an allegation which would not be investigated, and if somebody is actually guilty, he would be taken to task and put to justice.
A lot of promises of investigations and very few trials have taken place.
A lot of trials have taken place, and if there are individual instances, I'm sure that the National Human Rights Commission, which in many ways is acting as a very effective safeguard, would